I'm like that one conversation, that 1 hour conversation we had. Like, okay, the world's different now.
I always assume people have heard these stories from
cheers.
Afghanistan. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. You gotta drink that. You can't cheers.
Sorry, you
with,
can't
gotta
cheers
with
with that.
alcohol.
Yeah.
Buffalo Trace.
So yeah, the amount of man-on-man buggery in Afghanistan is significant. And
did they warn you about it before you went over there?
No. I think there were so many different things about both Iraq and Afghanistan that the learning curve for all of us was so high. Culturally, you don't think about a lot of those things. You just don't. You just, you grow up in America.
Right.
You assume every man is basically like an American male because that's at 26 or 27 years old. You know that there are cultural differences for sure, but I'm telling you, I was in Kuwait for like the first time early on, and the Kuwaitis like to hold hands. Like the dudes like to hold hands, and that's not comfortable. Like for guys.
Weird? Isn't that weird though? Because we do shake hands.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But you don't walk around holding another man's hand. It's just not comfortable in any scenario.
But imagine trying to explain that to someone who didn't understand, like, what makes it gay. Like, at what point in time does, like, holding onto a hand, does it get, like, there's, like, a meter. Like, you can kind of, like, hold onto a hot potato for a couple seconds, and it'll burn your hand.
After a certain point, you're walking around holding another man's hand, and you've never really done it, probably since you were a kid, maybe holding your dad's hand when you're like 3 or 4 years old. And in special forces, they tell you, you have to work with the cultural differences, and they're just talking in general.
Right.
They're not specific because they don't know where you're going, and you're going to have to work by, with, and through the host indigenous force. So you have to accept some of the things, the cultural differences, and just go with the flow.
Right.
So as a new Green Beret, SF guys, you're just walking around holding another man's hand. And you're so freaked out about it. You're like, oh man. Like, what the fuck does this mean? Like, you're questioning all your reality. Like, oh my God, and then after a few years, time and repetition and war or whatever, somebody goes to hold your hand and you're like, get the fuck away from me. I'm not doing that, bro. Come on, no, I'm not doing that.
So you gave up after a while?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things you give up, right? You're taught in SF, drink the tea, eat the food, do everything
assimilate.
That they do. Yeah, just completely assimilate. And honestly, like, a lot of that is really good because it does teach you to be a lot more open as far as listening to what they're going through from their tribal plights, like what are they going through from a combat experience, what do they need, and you want to build rapport. That's what you want to do. But rep after rep in a war zone, you kind of get fatigued with that, and then you're like, yeah, let's just get to the dirt here, man. Like, who do we want to kill? Like, let's get to that. And got it. You don't like that tribe. We don't like that tribe. We don't like this, you don't like that, cool. Okay, so I'm not gonna eat with you because every time I eat with you, I can't shit for like a normal shit for like a year. So we're just gonna not do any of that and
you tell me you literally didn't shit anything but diarrhea for, you said, more than a year?
Yeah, it was years, man. I was living and working with the Afghans, and I went from Iraq, and I did the invasion of Special Forces from the south, and I did multiple rotations in Iraq, both with SF and then with the agency when I went over there. And then when we shut down Iraq in 2009, I turned around and basically went to Afghanistan in 2009. So I went from Iraq to Afghanistan, and I went from Afghanistan, kind of finished up my CIA combat, I guess, experience, and then went back to the States to do a training thing. But by the time I got to Afghanistan, I had lots of time in Iraq. I had like 4 years on the ground. And Afghanistan was way different, but I was living and working with the Afghanis. I was eating with them. And your job is to not only train, assist, and advise, build rapport, but you're trying to figure it out. So you need to be on the ground with them, living, eating, breathing, sleeping, like the whole thing. And they're what we call the chow hall facilities aren't the cleanliest. You're trying, like you're working with them, you know, you institute different things like soap and water is like a good thing. And it doesn't really matter. You're still going to get sick based on, you know, the water, where is it coming from, what type of well source. Like there's lots of different variables, obviously. But dude, I didn't have a solid shit for 2 years. And it just kind of got normalized to the point where, you know, you're, it's such a gross thing to think about, man. You could not trust a fart ever. And I got this great story. So I came in off the gun trucks, and I'm tired. I'm like, went into the embassy and I had a meeting with somebody in Kabul, and I had this like titanium mug that was like the size of a toilet bowl, and I'm filling it up with coffee, and I haven't slept for, I don't know, let's say 20 hours at a time. I'm fucking dirty, and I'm filling up this coffee toilet bowl basically because I'm getting ready to go into a briefing, and I let out a fart, and it wasn't a fart. and the dude behind me was like, I didn't even turn around, dude. I knew there was somebody waiting for me, and I shit my pants, and I didn't even turn around. Didn't even blink an eye. Didn't even like lift up the handle because it was just normalized. And he goes, "Did you shit your pants?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I just turned around and walked off. It was the deputy ambassador or somebody. It was like the ambassador, right? And I'm just like, whatever, dude. I got shit to do. I'm out of here. Yeah. That's to the point of which I had a permanent stain in like my combat, my fatigues, right? It was just so bad. But I was like, you know what, man? You got shit to do. Like,
yeah, people adapt.
You don't sweat little things like that, and honestly, you're just trying to like get through you're trying to get through any and all things, and it's not like we're in trench warfare or anything like that. It's just like, dude, I had shit to do. I had people to train. We were going out, and I couldn't let that, like you can't pull over. Like, you can at times, but there are just times where you just can't. So you just got to keep moving, and it sucks. It's like the less glamorous side. I don't know if there's a lot of books out there telling all the cool stories about that. You know.
So when did you find out about the buggery? Was it something that you need to lie?
Yeah, it was. So it started in Kuwait, and I had a Arabic linguist, and he was a younger kid. You know, he was blonde hair, blue eyes, a Mormon kid. And he literally joined the Army at 18, you know, 2 years later after going to the Defensive Language Institute in Monterey, California. You come out and speaking Arabic, basically. And young kid, blonde hair, blue eyes, good Mormon kid, comes out, and he's with us. And the Kuwaitis kept talking about how they wanted to take him camping. And we're like, why do you want to take that dude camping? Like, what's so special about that guy? You know, and you're like, after a while, you realize, like, that's not what they wanted to do, right? They were, like, talking about it, in, like, either a joking way or a serious way, but that's the first exposure. Yeah. And then...
Did it take you a while to figure that out?
Yeah, because you're so naive. Like, dude, I'm 26 years old. Like, I don't fucking know. I don't think this is a thing. I grew up in Idaho. Like, I know, yeah, it exists, but I'm so... you know, blithely like moving through the world, like thinking everybody's an American male, right?
Right.
You know, this is weird. And then, you know, you go to Iraq, or I went to Iraq and multiple rotations over there, and you start to assimilate with the Iraqis you're either working with or you're training with, and then it kind of starts to fall apart, where it's like, oh, this is somewhat normal for them. Now, they don't talk about it. And I'm not saying it's like everyone, by the way. I'm saying like it's at least relevant enough culturally where it's somewhat normalized and not talked about. It's very
Is it similar in Kuwait as Afghanistan, or do they vary? Iraq is different?
Yeah, they're all a little bit different. And the Afghanis, we had to have, depending on where we were in their barracks living situation, like you had to put really hard restrictions, like, you know, no butt fucking guys for the majority of this, because this is a health issue. We weren't like, it's not like we were putting Bibles on their beds or something.
Right.
We're just saying, hey, this is really unhealthy. You guys are going to spread a bunch of different diseases to one another, and like, we've got a mission to accomplish here. And every SF guy, every guy that's like been in Afghanistan knows what Man Love Thursday is, and it's kind of a thing that they do.
Is it just Thursday, or is it? That's just a thing.
It's just a
to
thing.
say.
Yeah.
But it's just they fuck each other.
Yeah, they like
And
it.
so does the kid with the blue eyes?
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, you're like, hey, they don't really want to camp with him. They're trying to fuck this guy.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then you start thinking like, hey, how much of this is going on?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and then as you're exposed to not more of it, because you don't really see it, you hear about it. So as you build rapport, build confidence in your friendships, and people start to talk about, but it is fairly pervasive, and it's one of those things that you just kind of accept that's happening from a good portion of the guys. And
50%, 60%.
well, what we talked about, like, kind of rewinding, the more disturbing factor is it's socially indoctrinated in the children, like the sexual exploitation of children. So it starts early and then it moves into the adulthood. Bachabazi is a real thing, and you know, it's dressing boys to look like girls, and they have some Afghanis. When I say some, I don't know how pervasive it is, but it's a big percentage. And the adult male stuff, that's like one subsegment of their culture, but it's the sexual exploitation of children. That when you find that out, that's when things really turn for you psychologically. You're like, this place is really fucked.
Yeah.
And it's very pervasive. You know, if you go back and you read The Kite Runner, when I read The Kite Runner when I was in Afghanistan, I realized that, you know, it's not only the story about this kid, but it's also the story of Afghanistan. It's very, very, those stories run parallel, because children are sexually exploited regularly, and it's mainly the boys, from what I understand, to the point of which I was driving out on this op, I guess, from Kabul to Jalalabad. And when I first got to Afghanistan, I used to see these truck drivers, and I thought, you know, my dad was a truck driver. It's really cool these truck drivers take their sons out with them on the road. That's such a really cool cultural thing. And my interpreter turned to me, he was like, those aren't the kids, dude. That's how fucking horrible it is.
It's so horrible that they're on display.
Yes.
They're on parade, even,
Yeah.
you were saying. The guys would parade around their harem.
Kandahar and different areas, they'll have parades, and they're on displays to, this is my harem, and they're proud of it. And that was one of the most disturbing things that we would talk about, specifically between like the departments, between Department of State, CIA, and the military. Is like, when you're out with the guys from a tactical and combat role, you see them and you interact with the way they are from a tactical level every day. And you'd bring this up to management, and they would say, oh, that doesn't, what do you mean? That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. Or they pretend it doesn't happen. But if you were on the ground in Afghanistan during the times I was there, honestly, from 2001, we'll say, to the time that we pulled out, everybody uniformly would agree with what I'm saying. If you spent some time in Afghanistan, you knew it was happening.
Jesus Christ.
And
did you see these parades?
no, but National Geographic, I believe, did an article on it several years ago.
See if you're on it, Jim.
Yeah, Bachabazi. I could be getting the pronunciation a little bit off, but it turns for you emotionally and psychologically, because you're like, okay, now I've got some hate,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Made makes your job a little bit easier.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes your job a little bit easier.
Yeah.
It also makes it harder for you not to want to change the entire government system, where you want to completely, rewrite the entire DNA of the cultural infrastructure,
Right.
because it's sad and it's evil, and it's all of these like really horrible things. So as much as you want to help the Afghans and their plight, yeah, there you go.
Inside the lives of girls dressed as boys in Afghanistan, the cultural practice of bacha posh
Bacha Posh, I think that's the flip, that's the reverse.
encourages parents to dress their daughters as sons for a better future, but often it only makes life harder.
That's a different, so it's boys is
Oh, so
dressed
that's
as
the
girls.
opposite?
That's the opposite,
Girls dress as boys.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a different thing.
Yeah.
Why do they do that? What's that about? Girls dressing as boys.
Well, I think because, well, one, there's a very low education rate when I come back to
So they can
Afghanis.
get the kids
Yeah.
educated if they pretend
And-
they're boys?
Women are really seen as, in Afghanistan, well, I'm generalizing, right? I'm taking really big
Right.
swaths of the Afghan culture. So I know this isn't every Afghan. I've got lots of different Afghan friends, and I've hired a lot of Afghans. This isn't everybody.
Look at this. This is the
yes.
dancing
This is-
boys
and
of
they're-
Afghanistan. Go back up again. Show what's going on. These guys are throwing money at
Yes.
this dancing boy. Back that up, Jamie.
I just clicked somewhere random, kind of trying to get back to it.
Oh. What the fuck, man?
Yes. So
Those
they'll-
are like little boys, and they were dancing like strippers, and these guys are throwing dollars at them.
yes. Yep.
Oh my God, this is so crazy.
And they're younger, so they go much younger. This is the thing that people didn't want to talk about in Afghanistan, that we talked about regularly, which was these are very, what we feel are distinctly wrong. These are very wrong things from a American support, tactical and strategic intervention. Like, we should not encourage this whatsoever. And it made it very difficult at times for us to trust what the State Department or somebody else was saying. But I mean, this goes back to, Iraq, and honestly trust in policymakers and the State Department and their entire, position, either politically, philosophically. It's just fundamentally flawed.
So when you're hearing about this, and the one of the things about child molesting is that if these kids are growing up in this culture where they're going to be an adult and they're going to do that to kids as well, which has probably happened to all these guys, right? Like, this is, you're not going to fix that with all these people alive. Like, the culture gets to a point where it's so fucked that it's like, how can you ever fix that? How many generations would it take before the scars of all those people being abused wears off and normalizes, and people can be normal again? People can be like what we would consider a Western civilization, like London or New York.
But just
how?
What we feel is the morally appropriate cultural boundaries. Like,
Yeah.
that's like, how many generations would it take? And there's lots of different things that you can talk about, because the history of Afghanistan is, we'll say, post 80s and Soviet intervention, and then with the Taliban pushback, or the Mujahideen, and like, they've completely destroyed the education, the progress and evolution of Afghanistan. I mean, they had decades of war. Then you had basically a failed state with Taliban and extremist control. I mean, as the Taliban moved in, fundamentally, it's an evil organization. There's a soccer field in Kabul where the Taliban used to stone women to death because they weren't wearing their hijab, or the rule of a woman would be raped and she would be accused of infidelity on her husband, and they would stone her, or they would beat her with a stick. and they turned this soccer field into a place where they could have public displays for execution. It was completely insane when you think about it from where we're coming from and then where we're going, and we're trying to nation build, which I have like fundamental disagreement with that as well. But you eliminated the educated portion of your population. You swung to a very extremist, fear-based religion, and then it was all based on the Quran as far as their education system. So they completely separated the women away from being able to evolve. They treated them as beasts of burden. You had to be an Islamic extremist to be acceptable. It was a completely hegemonic theoretical state, or hegemony as far as like it's the theocracy ran everything, and it was a very extremist version of Islam. And as we came in, and I wasn't there in 2001, I came there much later. I came there in 2009 was my first real rotation there. It had been 7 years, but really it was almost like going back in time, almost 1,000. It felt like you were going back in time like 1,000 years.
That's one of the things we were talking about in camp. That when you hear about Socrates and all these ancient cultures, the Spartans, all these people that like had boys.
Yes.
And you see what's going on in Afghanistan, and you realize like how old a culture Afghanistan is. It's like one of the oldest civilizations in terms of like the way they behave. It's almost like they never caught up with the Western world. I think it was Michael Shermer might have wrote a paper about this. He wrote an article about how Islam's the only religion that didn't go through the Enlightenment, and that it's essentially maintains the same values and the same cultural values as when it was created. So how old is Islam?
1600. I think it's like 500 years past Christianity, so it's called 1500 years.
1500 years old, whatever it is. That's how people behaved back then. That's what it is. And when you think about like Alexander the Great, who was gay, right, who conquered much of Afghanistan and giant swaths of the world, he probably like his army and his behavior and what he probably stained that area with like a type of behavior.
I think you're 100% right. I think that you had portions of the world that were culturally cut off from being able to evolve at the same rate as some of the other places within the Middle East. And those tribes essentially haven't had the opportunity to evolve because they've been very isolated. I mean, you look at Afghanistan, it's an extremely isolated area of the world. And if you go back to the 70s, it was relatively progressive, somewhat secular. And then the Soviet intervention, the collapse, the failed state led to the rise of the Taliban because they had eviscerated all of the intellectual and the economic class. And in order to succeed or live there, you had to completely capitulate to the theocracy and the fascist state. So you had to go back in time to live. You had to grow a beard. And when I say this, is it everybody is 100%? No. I'm saying like this is the way people live. They lived under tyrannical rules that provided zero opportunity for, if you had girls, sorry, they're beasts of burden. They treat goats and donkeys better than their girls, their children. The homelessness of children in a war zone is so heartbreaking. Like it strips away at the goodness in your soul watching desperation. And when you see homeless children every day in these cities that are dirty, starving, and there's really not a lot you can do because you have a war to fight. And you not only think about it from the homelessness position, you think about the exploitation position. Like, these kids are so fucked. They're homeless. They don't have parents because maybe their fathers were either, killed in the war. Their mothers they can't afford to keep them, and they continue to have more kids, and especially if they've been raped, then there's a cycle of not only exploitation and violence, but then it's also it keeps them down economically. So you have massive amounts of children that were homeless and exploited, and they're starving. And it's you from my perspective, when you live in that environment, and you can't think about it. Like, you have to shut that stuff out. Because if you think about it, it's like opening the door of the submarine. All the water's coming in, it's gonna fucking sink it. So you have to build for a lack of a better term, man, you have to build a house on your soul. Because you can't function and meet and exceed your mission success criteria if you get steamrolled by depression on what you're seeing every day.
Oh my God.
Time and repetition, which is one of the big problems, I think, with the GWOT community, or at least what we've had in the last 20 years. I mean, there's lots of different compounding factors that I think contribute to the acceleration of veteran suicide, which I don't want to launch into some rant about the issues that we're all faced, but it's definitely something I'm extremely passionate about.
Yeah, I'm really hoping, and we've talked about this a bunch of times in this podcast, but I'm really hoping that something's going to change with RFK and about psychedelics and veterans. I really, really am hoping that they open their eyes to this stuff.
Well, I was talking to Marcus Capone, and he runs VETS, which he's the guy, his organization is the organization that takes the guys to Mexico to do Ibogaine. And Marcus is a retired SEAL. I was talking to him yesterday, actually, and I'll go off on this, which is, we as a subculture from the global war on terror community, the veterans, we're under an epidemic of suicide and depression. And the VA has not been a help to us, especially the war fighters, like the guys that we have rogered up time and time and time again. We've gone overseas, we've done the bidding for the country, we've watched our friends get killed and fucking torn in half in very ultra-violent ways. We've been exposed to overpressure and chemicals and all these other things. And then we come back, and within the VA system, their answer is, here's your pills, here's your retirement, shut the fuck up. And it's not working. Marcus and I were talking about this yesterday. He was on antidepressants for 7 years. 7 years, antidepressants, and they weren't working. And he, just by chance, his wife, I believe, said this might work. We need to go to Mexico and do Ibogaine. This might work. So here's a guy that did it one time, has never been on antidepressant since.
Did he have to get off them before he went there and did it?
I don't know exactly what the protocol is as far as you have to get off and you have to get back down there. I know that most of my friend group now, they've done it, and they have an extremely high success rate. VETS has done 1,000 former warfighters, and they have an extremely high success rate where they're eliminating pharmaceuticals. So they'll go down, they'll do it one time, maybe they've done subsequent sessions, and they have this really high success rate. And this is
better
part
than
of the this is part of the issue.
Yeah.
Is we're under an epidemic of veteran suicide, more so than we ever have. And the worst thing about this too is it's also affecting our family and our kids. Our kids are 4 times higher to commit suicide than our peer set. So it's not just the GWOT veteran community. Now it's our families and our children. You have something that has such a proven track record to help heal vets. And we can't do it without breaking the law. We have to leave the country. It's insane. So you can send me to Iraq under false pretenses, and you can have Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld and all this like orchestra of fucking idiots can send us all to Iraq for weapons of mass destruction. We can go fight the wars, come back, and now we have to break the law to go fix what's wrong with our heads, or our emotions, or not only our psychology, but dude, we're broken. Like, we've been beat up and kind of shoved in a closet, and then we're sedated and told to shut the fuck up. And meanwhile, Wolfowitz and Bremer and all these other guys, they get to walk around and provide, public speeches about how fucking great they are because they're, strategically important. Whereas my peer set, we're under an epidemic of suicide. Our kids are committing suicide. The VA's no help to us, and we have to go break the law. It's like you get to go flip a fucking coin and paint some paintings, and you think that everything's okay.
And that one doesn't make any sense.
No.
Out of all the ones, that's one that mushrooms you can do recreationally. No one's doing recreational ibogaine. I've
No.
never done it before. Have you done it?
No.
I've never done it, but
No.
everybody that I've talked to, that they said it is one of the most like ruthlessly introspective journeys in your life. It's not fun at all. Dakota Meyer told me, he's like, I fucking hated it. I couldn't believe someone made me do it. After it was over, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? It's not a fun time. It's not a recreational drug. It's not a drug of addiction. It's not a drug of dying. It's not. Let's find out what the LD50 rate is for ibogaine. It's probably bananas. It's probably just like psilocybin. Probably can't really overdose on it.
No,
I don't know that.
I don't know.
Ibogaine might do it. It sounds really crazy potent.
Most of my close friends have done either ayahuasca or ibogaine, neither of which they would say is a good time. All of which have said, 100%. And they've come back and been not only fundamentally changed but better. And these are, my business partner, Jared Taylor, has gone and done ibogaine. And then multiple other people that probably don't want me to talk about them on the podcast, guys that have been on 15, 20 different pharmaceuticals, can literally scrape them off their dresser into a garbage can the day they get back.
Crazy.
And the fact that we aren't trying to evolve this section of the medicine, I know that Stanford did a study. I'm not exactly familiar with all the data associated with it, but the fact that we aren't leading the charge as a country to come up with dynamic, out-of-the-box solutions for the guys that have gone overseas and done the hard and courageous task for this country, and they come back and they can't get help, and we're not pushing the envelope. That's a crime. I mean, I got lots of issues with Iraq at this point, right? I mean, it's fundamentally. And I've told this to people, like, Iraq is with me every day, right? Afghanistan was a part of my life, but Iraq fundamentally changed me for the rest of my life. And I think about it every day. It's not going away. It'll never go away. And
What about Iraq that was much different than Afghanistan that changed you?
well, it's the first war experience I had. And, for me, I was like hook, line, and sinker. Regime change, move. We've got to find weapons of mass destruction. We've got to eliminate the threat. We got to fight them there so we don't have to fight them here.
Everybody thought it was real.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was nobody more motivated to go to war than me. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was, but you know what I'm saying.
You were in that
yeah.
group. You were gung-ho.
Oh, 100%. It's not only, hey, we're going to go to war, we're going to do something good for America. These guys attacked the United States. We're going to eliminate the terrorist threat. And war is such a strange and surreal circumstance because it changes you for good, it changes you for the bad. And I've looked at this a lot. And I looked at like life experience like a radio wave, almost like a band, where you have highs, you have lows, and most people, we'll call it 90+% of the United States, their frequency only gets so high and only gets so low, and it basically stays within, we'll say, a fairly small band within the center. combat, what happens is you go really high and you go really low, and it forces you outside of social norms on a second to second basis. And then you do that over and over and over again. And so one person might get in a car wreck in their life, and that goes really low. So it's a really high adrenaline dump, and it goes really low because they have an injury. That's like one thing. Well, going out in a combat zone multiple night, like not only multiple nights a week, sometimes you're doing multiple targets a night. You might be getting in what the rough equivalent of an adrenaline car wreck, what the rough equivalent of a car wreck from an adrenaline dump and a high and a low. You might be doing that 3 or 4 times a night. And then you're doing that night after night, week after week. And it fundamentally changes you because you have to chop all of this down, because if you get too ramped up and too chaotic, you're going to lose control and you won't be able to complete your mission criteria. If you get too low, you also won't be able to achieve your mission criteria. Your survival instincts kick down, so it chops your ability to feel all the way down to a normal person's bandwidth because it's a survival mechanism. And this is just my own assessment. So from a combat experience perspective, the first time you feel it, and I'll tell you, I mean, the first time I was in an ambush, I was losing my shit. I mean, anybody that tells you they're not fucking scared, they're either like fundamentally flawed. They're like Travis Pastrana, he doesn't have like a fear portion of his brain, or they're just lying. Like, you're scared out of your fucking mind. Like going north, like driving north into Iraq, you're looking into the deep dark abyss of the unknown, and you're like, what the fuck? Am I going to be a coward? You know, am I going to live? Am I going to die? I mean, our projected casualty rates was that we were going to lose most of our ODA. So you're stepping into a situation where you're going, okay, well, I know out of this 6-shooter that I'm going to play Russian roulette with, there are 4 bullets in this.
Oh my God.
And you're driving north going, okay, let's fucking do it. So you've already capitulated and given yourself up to die, which is, it's actually a very cathartic, and I think personally an experience that you can evolve from. Because at that point, if you're dead, you can live uninhibited. Like, everything I do from this point forward, this is gravy on the steak, man. I'm already dead.
Right.
I was driving north in Iraq, and I, like, through like the desert, and you know, my best friend and I are like driving north, and you have like hours to stare off into the fucking sand. You know, you've got night vision goggles or whatever. I had a whole fictionalized funeral for myself. I just fucking, what else am I gonna do, right? You're just like driving north, you know, and there's nothing going on. So I had a whole fictionalized funeral. I buried myself, and so I was already dead, or at least I felt like that. And then we get in our first engagement, and the world starts cracking apart, and your mind can't keep up to what's actually happening. You'll hear the gunfire, and you know, I felt the explosion. I looked in the rearview mirror of the Humvee, which just sounds crazy. I looked in the rearview mirror, and I saw this like car-sized chunk of fire flying behind the vehicle. Like, so distinctly remember this. And I'm turning my team leader, and I'm like, we gotta get the fuck out of here. You know, I'm like losing it, right? It's so stupid. It's so stupid. We gotta get the fuck out of here. You know, I'm like losing it, dude. I'm just fucking losing it. And he's like, and he's cool, man. He's like calm, cool. He's on the radio, you know. He's like, you know, vehicle 1, you know, or vehicle 3, this is vehicle 1, vehicle 3, this is vehicle 1. And we're checking to see if we have comms between us and the other vehicles. And I'm fucking losing it. I'm like, well, get the fuck out of here. You know, it's like, okay. Because, I mean, you know, you're used to, like, watching movies or whatever, and it's the first time anything like this has ever happened.
Right.
And at this point, you know, the full insurgency hasn't kicked off, that we're hunting Fedayeen. These guys weren't the most sophisticated cats on the planet. They weren't that good. So, but we end up pushing through and then consolidating at the end of this. And fundamentally, this like changed my tactical experience in combat forever, because my team leader, who I respect and loved, he was killed 2 years later. He's one of my best friends. He was my best friend. He turns to me and he goes, "Hey man, if you don't have a solution to the problem, just shut the fuck up."
That's great advice.
I know.
That's great advice across the board.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, roger that. You know, I was like, okay, fucking roger that, man. And then it became a practice discipline. When shit's going super sideways and, you know, bullets, when bullets are flying. I hate sounding like that. I don't want to sound like that at all.
But that's what it is.
Dude, you keep your shit together. And then I became, by the time my last ambush in Iraq I was in was I'll bookend this experience with an ambush. I was in Mosul, and I was in a little BMW trying to work my way, and I was working basically a low, like you're trying to fly under the radar. You're low vis, CIA at this point. So we're trying to blend in. We got hit at a checkpoint when they light us up, and so now I'm alone in a car with another guy and the CIA chief, and the entire Iraqi army in Mosul, Iraq, is essentially pursuing us through Mosul is the size of Los Angeles, and I started at the north end of Los Angeles, basically, and had to work my way to the southern end of Los Angeles being shot at. And I'm trying to sort through the problem, man. Like, I got a fucking map sheet, and you don't know. I mean, this is Mad Max in the fucking Thunderdome. I mean, Mosul was one of the most fucked up cities in Iraq. Like, it looked like going back to Stalingrad in different sections of this place. It was a complete shit show. And I'm alone with the guys with, and I'm trying to navigate through the city and help the driver. We're being pursued from literally north to south, being shot at, and we're going, okay, right turn. And I mean, I have like, the dragons are at the bumper. They're gonna pull me out of this car and chop my fucking head off. Like, they're gonna turn my car into Swiss cheese. They're gonna fucking cut my head off, and I'm dead. We're dead. And I brought up Kiowas. They were on station. We had a really good relationship with these guys. And I was like, hey, this is me. I'm in a, black BMW, like, and I'm moving, from north to south, and the helicopter came back to, oh, I know who you are. You got everybody following you, because not all checkpoints are created equal, and for whatever reason, they decided they were going to kill somebody. And I mean, you don't have time. You're not going to sit around and be like, why do you guys want to kill us? Well, we're just good guys, You're just going to keep moving. And I had to work my way all the way south to a bridge, and I had like one last fucking Hail Mary, man. Like, we had to get across a bridge into a place called Diamondback. And I didn't have a QRF because they couldn't pin us down, a quick reaction force. And like, the Kiowas, like, they saved our life, because they had the roads blocked off on the bridge, and I was basically smoking in at like 100 fucking kilometers an hour. And the Kiowas came down and like literally dropped their fucking skids on the front of the front of the car and panned around like, we're gonna kill all you fuckers.
Wow.
And I looked over at one of the guys. I looked over and like flipped him off, and it was like, "You dead," And then like parting the seas, like Moses or whatever. They moved the fucking cars, and we drove back in, and that was it. So bookending, my point of that conversation was, I was losing my shit, the first one, right? And I came back and I was talking to Kiowas, and they were like, bro, we didn't know how bad this was because it sounded like you were ordering a pizza. But everything in between was like, like rep after rep after rep after rep was like, like, calm down, keep your shit together. And one of my really close friends, this guy Jeff Kirkham, was my first team sergeant, like awesome fucking guy, like one of the most tactically relevant people in my life. He's like, psychology is more contagious than food. So when you start losing your shit,
Ooh, that's so
it
true.
infects everybody else around you.
What a great quote.
And
Psychology is more infectious than the flu. That is a great quote.
yeah, man,
That's so real.
so real.
That's so real. That's so real. With everything.
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 It controlled every piece of what I would do from that point forward. Like, lose your shit in a gunfight, and then you infect everybody else around you.
Yes.
Rise to the occasion, be the calm in the chaos, become a, even if you don't feel like it, even if you're wigging out, man. Like,
Of course.
internally, you can barely keep your shit together, but what you do is you're like, okay, but I gotta project this, because if I infect everybody else with my chaos, I'm injecting more chaos into the equation, and we're all gonna run the possibility of dying because of this, because of my action.
I think that's why people gravitate towards inspirational figures. It's because they're trying to get some of that psychology. They're trying to get it worn off on them. You know, great quotes and great feats and fascinating people. You want to absorb some of that psychology. That is such a great quote, though, because it's so true. If you're around someone that's freaking out, you're trying to keep your shit together. It's so hard to keep your shit together.
You can't. But
Right.
if you're around a bunch of dudes
You're just
that are
stoic.
surgeons and
Yeah.
stoic,
Yeah.
and there's no flexion.
Mhm.
What I would say is, like, in the time and repetition in the community, I mean, there's a default emotion that is acceptable. It's, anger. Right? So anger, and when I say joy, it's like joy from gallows humor typically, right? But it's
Right.
like you have to, everybody becomes a stoic.
Yeah.
Nothing can phase you. And if you are a guy that's phased,
You're a liability.
you're a liability. You're going to get chopped.
Yeah, you're infected.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Iraq, so going back to what I was talking about with Iraq, I'm supercharged, and my reality started to kind of crumble. Is we went up, we were on the first ODAs, and we did this joint op with the CIA to go meet this guy Muqtada al-Sadr. This is early on. This is like March of the war, and Muqtada al-Sadr became a prominent figure later on in the war. He was really relatively not known at all in the beginning of it, and was working with the CIA case officer at that point. Not just me, it was like my entire team. And Muqtada's like he's a bad guy, like he's just a real piece of shit. And at that point, on Najaf was this town, and we went out, did a meeting with him, and we came back, and all of us on the military, paramilitary side, we're like, this guy needs to die. Like, we need to actually go, and he's a small armed force. He's basically going to be the instrument of the Iranians. And we're having this big debate in the team room. And everybody that carried a gun, like, we speak animal kingdom. We know when there's a threat.
Right.
And then we had this case officer who was like a, adjunct professor at fucking Georgetown. I didn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. And we're like, this guy needs to die. We need to go, like, get on him now. And case officer was like, no, he's gonna work with us, And we're like,
They wanted him to be an asset.
yeah. We're like, this guy is fucking stupid. Like, this guy's he's a Shia, supposedly Shia cleric. If you know Iraq, you got 60% of the country Shia. It's typically going to answer Iran. You've got 15-20% is up north. It's the Kurds. And then you've got the rest is Sunni. And we're like, this guy's not going to fucking work. This guy's a real piece of shit, and he's already spinning up a militia. He's going to be a problem. No. And we're like, okay, like you're the big brain on Brad, you know, you're the PhD man, like sure, you know. So we acquiesce, and years later, I don't know how many guys died going back into Najaf trying to find this fucking guy. I don't know how many. I mean, it was a whole basically surge push of probably a division to try to go find this guy. But we had the opportunity to kill him right there. Like literally, we could have, like, he had less than 40 guys on the compound. We could have like gone out and got him right like that night, and then he became a problem. And not only did he become a problem, it was like the decision makers were so poor at that point early in the war. It started to really affect me in the sense of like I was still bought and sold, but I started to really think these guys might not know what the fuck they're doing when there's like Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld, Brennan, when they de-Baathified Iraq. So after we invaded, they did this thing called de-Baathification, which was basically they fired the military and everybody that was involved in the Ba'ath Party. And we're once again, we're in the team room. We're watching CNN, and it's Rumsfeld talking about we're de-Baathifying Iraq. We're firing everybody. And I'm not exaggerating. Everybody in the team room was like, "What the fuck? Like you guys are going to create the insurgency." Like it was on the ground. That moment, that second, like I wanted to throw, like I wanted to throw a fucking brick through the TV. Like I was like, these guys are paint by numbers creating an insurgency. They have no fucking clue what they're doing. And that was like that moment, which is fairly early, where I lost a lot of confidence in the decision makers. But okay, you know, the question is, well, why'd you keep going back? Well, because you want to try to search for meaning, and you're trying to find the actual purpose. Like, what is the purpose? Like, are there WMDs here? Like, are there, you know, like legit direct traces back to 9/11? Are there things that we're doing that are going to directly affect and protect America? And you're kind of searching for it. And not kind of, you are. Like, that's what you're doing, or at least that's what I was doing. And by the time I left in 2009, I just figured I was gonna die. Like I was like, fuck this place. Like fuck, I lived Iraq, right? And then I was like, well, I think time and repetition in thinking that you're dead for that long, and then searching for not only some what I would say is good in the war itself, because there is good. You have your buddies, you have the camaraderie, you have the adrenaline, but you also think you're gonna fucking die every day for years on end, and that's not fundamentally, it turns out it's probably not good for you psychologically, I guess. And so I went to Afghanistan thinking, well, and I went to train Afghanis for a force up there. And when I went to train those guys, it was, hey, if I can train Afghanis to take on the war, maybe I can protect 18-year-old kids from getting their fucking legs blown off. You know, maybe I can protect the 20-year-old kid from Nebraska from getting a fucking RPG stuffed through their face. And I was older, and I was also willing to die. So the kids, when I say the kids, 18, 20 years old, like, man, it's not, it's not fun to watch those. When I say that, that's an understatement. It's so heartbreaking to watch a kid that's never been to fucking combat, like, die. It changes everything in life. And so you go from, Iraq to Afghanistan, and I'm watching all this stuff unfold, and and I don't want to say it's all negative because there were things that were very positive, but I'm so jaded by the time I get there that I'm like, well, if I can save some Americans, I'll save some Americans, and if not, at least this will be an interesting experience. And then, there's a laundry list of other things that we can talk about. I don't want to get so fucking down, I guess.
It seems like it's impossible not to once you're going back on it. And how could you not? And the overwhelming negative experiences, the overwhelming horrific experiences.
Well, I think that's where I have this massive distrust in politicians. And I think that's part of the reason they have squandered the courage of the American servicemen in these forever wars that we've entered in under lies. So Wolfowitz and W and Rumsfeld and yeah. And sorry, man, I don't have any respect for those guys. Not only do I not have any respect for those guys, I have a profound amount of hatred for their arrogance. Because I'm in my 20s. I'm not making excuses, but there's plenty of guys like me that were not only hook, line, and sinker, and I still would. I'd still sign up for this country. I think service is a remarkable courage. It's courage and service back to our community is something we have to cherish, like we do. But when you have an orchestra of idiots that are manipulating the courageous men and women of our country to go into these wars based on a neocon pipe dream, and there's no consequences. You can pull out of Afghanistan only billions of dollars of equipment. Who the fuck got fired? But if I made a mistake, if me and my buddies made a mistake, we lost our lives. We go to jail. We lost our clearances. And I'm not trying to sound like a whiny bitch. I'm just saying, no consequences for these guys. Nothing. They get to go paint paintings and they think it's okay.
Imagine no consequences for lying about weapons of mass destruction. And has there ever been a large-scale investigation as to what led them to either believe or to push the narrative that there was weapons of mass destruction?
Well, I think if you read, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of books out there, obviously, and whether or not you have to kind of sort through the actual documents and figure out where these guys were at. And I've spent a little bit of my life trying to understand from their perspective, and I honestly think a big part of it is the guys who are making the decision. Their hubris, their utopian belief that they were going to be able to rebuild Iraq like Houston. It's an oil country, and they really believed that if they didn't rein in this rogue nation of Iraq, that Iraq was going to eventually contribute to terrorism. And you had guys that were so consumed with their intelligence when it flipped to not only hubris, but they didn't have wisdom, they had intelligence. Wolfowitz is a smart guy. He's not an idiot. The problem is he's not wise. These guys weren't wise men. There's a difference between having a high IQ and having the experience and repetition, seeing death and destruction, seeing people's lives fucking torn apart, and then understanding something from reading a book or thinking about it from an economics perspective. And, I think Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, Cheney, they had this belief that they could do anything they wanted to validate this. And they did. They had to data mine information and pull and pluck from different analysts that agreed with them. But most of the intel community didn't agree with them. They're like, we had defeated the Iraqi army to the point, when I say defeated it, if we go back to the 90s, we say Desert Storm was 91, And then from that point forward, you can basically say, you know, HW to Clinton administration with the economic sanctions, and with the integrated bombing campaigns that they had led throughout the 90s, we had essentially stuffed that guy back into a hole where the only thing he could do was sell oil on the black market. And he had a fascist state where he and his family had, you know, complete control out of the country, but he wasn't going to be a threat from an international terrorism perspective. That's just false. It's not only false, but it is patently false. And they had to mine the data to validate it. They had to lie. They had to sift through and find and pick and pull the pieces of information. And they really thought this was going to be a fucking cakewalk. They did.
Because of Desert Storm, you think?
They thought because of Desert Storm and they were listening to these assets like Chalabi and some of these former Iraqi exiles, and they're listening to these guys who, by the way, were also manipulated by the Iranians and paid for by Iranian intel guys. They're Iranian assets. They're listening to these people, and they were living in their own echo chambers, validating this idea that it was better for regime change, for the international, not only the international economy, but it was going to be, you know, a stable petroleum-based country where we could integrate democracy. And none of these guys were Arabists. None of these guys actually understood the Middle East, not one. They didn't have any combat experience. They didn't really have any combat experience from the long-term, low-intensity conflict, guerrilla warfare perspective. They were given not only the information, but they were given most of the information they were given was saying this is going to be much more complex than you think it's going to be. And they denied not only the opinions, but the information, and they went ahead with their fucking plans anyway. Rumsfeld single-handedly dictated how many people were going to participate in the war. Like, he was dictating how many divisions it was going to take, and he's like, actually, I think you could do it for half that. Like, he was like trying to negotiate how many guys that Tommy Franks was going to use to invade Iraq. And Tommy Franks didn't have the balls to say, actually, I need 2 more divisions. So a lot of this is just like fundamentally, these are professional politicians and bureaucrats drinking their own piss. Like I was saying earlier, you know, like you can drink your own piss once or twice before your kidneys start to shut down and it'll fucking kill you, right? These guys are all sitting around in their echo chambers talking to the same types of people, defining how they were going to send servicemen and women to Iraq, and they were wrong. Not only were they wrong, but they were told otherwise by lots of different people, to include, I mean, Tony Blair had a lot of different issues with this. Colin Powell essentially sold this and got the dominoes to fall on the entire thing, because they knew that Colin Powell was so respected that if he sat in front of the UN with Tenet, who was the director of the CIA, right behind him, and held up this little thing of you know, VX or whatever it was, that they could push it across the line from the international community. I mean, these guys were crooked, man. And not only were they crooked, they were so fundamentally wrong. And there's no consequences.
Nothing.
0 consequences.
They put Martha Stewart in jail.
Yeah. Yeah, they go after Trump for fucking 2 years on, you know, Russia collusion. It's like, you spent $7 trillion in thousands of American lives, hundreds of thousands of lives in Afghanistan and Iraq. And you're saying you're going to put this guy through the ringer for 2 years because there might be some dossier that was paid for by the Clintons? Like, who's the criminal? And so for me, yeah, I get all wound up when it comes to this, because rep after rep, year after year, my 2 closest friends in the world were literally one torn in half by a EFP, which was a Iranian manufactured shape charge. You know, my other friend was turned into fucking moon dust. And I mean, these are my 2 closest friends in the world, like guys I grew up with in the army that I spent every fucking day with. And Since then, I've had obviously more friends, but I mean, those are the two closest friends in the earliest part of the war. So I'm so directly affected by this because it fundamentally changed who I was forever. It gave me a profound amount of mistrust in my government, in the decision makers. I actually don't believe what they're telling me anymore. I have a lot of skepticism when it comes to the people that are pulling the handles in government. And I have to go to my peer set, and what I told people is, man, my currency is courage, right? It's like, that's what I broker in. So my friends that have gone through the GWOT, which I'm extremely happy for all these GWOT guys that are in, like, getting appointed to these positions. You've got Pete, you've got Tulsi, JD. Like, they fundamentally know that what war is. And when you have decision makers that have never been to war and their kids will never go to war, and Cheney's kids never went to war,
Right.
W's kids never went to war,
Right.
And none of these guys, by the way, they're all Vietnam era guys. None of them went to fucking Vietnam. So it's
Nor
really
did
easy.
Trump didn't either, right? You got a bunch of deferments.
But I think the difference is that when somebody is saying stop the endless wars,
Right.
I am more than happy to go chips in on that narrative
Yes.
than I am to go, oh, we need to invest and put more time, money, energy into creating more chaos and destruction in the American service members' lives or the lives of other people.
Did you ever see that speech with Mike Pence and Tucker Carlson?
No.
Tucker Carlson essentially ended Mike Pence's political career
Really?
in one speech. Yeah. Because this was when Pence was running for president. And Tucker was sitting there with him, and Pence was talking about getting helicopters and tanks and weapons to Ukraine. And he was explaining how they were being incompetent because they weren't providing them with what they needed. And Tucker went on this rant. See if you can find it. I bet you could find it under that. Here it is. Listen to this.
The whole thing. You should make sure the Tucker part, because it's still 4 minutes long.
Let me hear what he says. Just start right where your cursor is. Click where your cursor is.
Somebody transfer some jets.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President.
Yes.
Have you, I know you're running for president. You are distressed that the Ukrainians don't have enough American tanks. Every city in the United States has become much worse over the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Drive around. There's not one city that's gotten better in the United States. And it's visible. Our economy has degraded. The suicide rate has jumped. Public filth and disorder and crime have exponentially increased. And yet, your concern is that the Ukrainians, a country most people can't find on a map, who've received tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars, don't have enough tanks. I think it's a fair question to ask, like, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern.
What?
Tucker, I've heard that routine from you before, but that's not my concern. I'm running for president of the United States because I think this country's in a lot of trouble. I think Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. And as president of the United States, we're going to restore law and order in our cities. We're going to secure our border. We're going to get this economy moving again. And we're going to make sure that we have men and women on our courts at every level that will stand for the right to life and defend all the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution. Anybody that says that we can't be the leader of the free world and solve our problems at home has a pretty small view of the greatest nation on earth. We can do both. And as President of the United States, we will secure our border, we will support our military, we will revive our economy and stand by our values, and we will also lead the world for freedom under my administration. I promise you.
Amen. Vice President Mike Pence, thank you very much.
Just that. That's not my concern. That's not my concern. What the fuck are you talking about? Why? How would you ever answer anything that way? That is not my concern. That's not your concern. You don't think he just made a really good point that we're really confused as to, first of all, aren't we like $1 trillion in debt? How do we have?
No, we're $35.5 trillion in debt. Like, it's crazy.
It's crazy. How do we have the money?
How do we
We
have the
don't.
money to send to Iraq, and we don't have the money to fix our cities? How can you say that's not my concern? What that is the opposite of what Trump is.
Yeah.
That is nonsense talk. I mean, not that he isn't that nonsense talk, but that is not a person's real feelings.
No.
That is just political speech. That's just, we're going to clean up our country. We're going to preserve the right to life.
It's memorizing sound bites.
Exactly.
And that's the entire problem with Washington right there.
Yeah, exactly.
They memorize sound bites. They say one thing, they do the other thing.
Exactly.
They've lost the trust of their constituents. They've lost the trust of the American public.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's administration after administration and politician after politician.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a surprise that people don't like politicians. I mean, look at that guy.
Yeah.
He's a fucking robot.
He's weird.
He's a weird dude.
He's weird. You know, they kept trying to say JD's weird. JD's not weird at all. I met that guy. He's fucking cool. He's normal. Smart as shit. I could hang with that guy. He could be my friend.
Yeah.
Like, he's not even a little weird.
No, that guy's
know?
weird.
I mean, I guess anybody who's that smart is weird. You know, people that go to Yale, people that, like, he's weird in that way. Like, that's an odd dude. You don't see a lot of those. But normal. That guy's bizarre. Like, his face doesn't move. Did you get Botox at 80? Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, you're weird.
I think they have low IQs and they're pushing that thing to the red. That's why they're actually so afraid to do anything, because they're like, I'm really pushing this thing. I've got like a Hyundai, like a 105, but my parents were rich. So I went to Yale.
Right.
And if I break outside of my box, actually people are going to know that I'm a fucking retard. So
Right. Well, I also think that if you're that you have ambition at that level, and you're so driven to become the alpha that you want to be the president, the amount of work that's involved in that doesn't leave a whole lot of room for reading. Doesn't leave a whole lot of room for watching documentaries and having important in-depth conversations with people, expanding your understanding of the world. It's very narrow. They're basically actors. Most of these people exhibit a lot of the traits that I see in actors. This desire to morph oneself to please the people around you, the saying the things you think people want to hear because you want to get ahead. It's all like very similar. They're actors. And the fact that these actors can rise to a position where they can actually dictate what these military veterans do and don't do when they have no knowledge or experience in this.
no.
That's the fact that that's a real thing is fucking crazy. It's really crazy.
I mean, I think that's, by the time I left, I was so jaded, and the motivating factor was, it's like no man will ever have control over my destiny again. Like I will not put a bit in my mouth
Yeah.
for another man in the government. They will not be making decisions for me.
Yeah,
And-
I don't think we can recall a time in our history where we did trust the government. But there's this, which is such a weird thing to say. You know, I used to think it was the Obama administration, but boy, Obama during this Kamala Harris administration, it changed my opinion of that guy. Boy.
Really? Did you have a high opinion of him
Yeah,
before?
I did. Yeah, I did. Just as an intelligent person, a statesman, I felt like he's probably like caught up in the system. It's very difficult to make real meaningful change. You know, you think you're going to do something, and then you get into office, and you're like, oh God, what a fucking quagmire this place is. But watching him just straight up lie about Trump, the thing that got me was that very fine people thing, the white supremacist thing. They just kept trying to say that he was a racist, which is this thing that I think worked in like 2017.
Yeah.
You know, I think it worked back then. I don't think it works anymore. I don't think people believe it anymore. I think that we've gotten numb to all this stuff.
It's the sky is falling thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
you cry
yeah.
wolf or whatever. It's like you guys can only call me a fascist so many times. I mean, like the New York Times wrote that article a couple years ago, right? Where I'm like, it was like in front of the coffee cup where it was like, do you want Trump 2024? Do you want low taxes? Do you want this? Do you want
Yeah.
that? I'm like, I want all that. Sounds
Yeah.
good. And like you can only call me a fascist, racist, asshole. I mean, to be fair, like I can float into the asshole category relatively easy, but you
Only
can only
when
call all of us
prompted.
that. Yeah.
Only when prompted. Yeah, it's
You know what my fucking favorite things of this whole election cycle has been? Yesterday. When Biden and Trump sat down in the White House, Biden voted for Trump. I guarantee it. I fucking guarantee it. I never saw that dude so happy in his fucking life. He lost. His party lost. He was happy. When Obama had to shake hands with Trump and do the whole transition thing, Obama looked like Jesus Christ. Look at Biden. Look at his fucking smile, dude.
Trump's like, whatever.
Look at his
him.
fucking smile, man. That's like when your kid gets married.
That dude
You
looks
know?
like a hairless cat. Look at him.
It's great. First of all, what have they done to him? What have they
they've
done to
done
his
it all.
face?
Yeah.
Go back to the other picture because it was more high res. Look at his mug, man. First of all, for sure he's got something going on with his forehead. They Botoxed the shit out of his forehead. They gave him a facelift for sure. There's a bunch of different things they did, which is very ill-advised, by the way, folks. Look at Trump. He looks like shit. No one cares. Everyone loves him. You don't look better if you get your face pulled back like a lizard.
No.
You just look more like a lizard. Everybody thinks you're a lizard already. But look at that smile. That motherfucker's never been happier in his life. In his life. He's like, that bitch. She went down. You can't tell me he wasn't happy. Like when he put that MAGA hat on. You ever see that?
Oh, yeah.
He put the
was
MAGA hat on. And he took it with him on the plane. I guarantee you, that motherfucker was happy. He had a giant smile on his face. He said, welcome back to him. I thought it was Hitler. I thought he was dangerous.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they all said, right? It's like, hey, this is he's a threat to democracy.
I thought he was
this,
a Nazi.
And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're going to have a smooth transition here.
This was the guy that you said was sharp as a tack. He was going to, up until 4 months ago. 4 months ago, that guy was going to be running again. And now here he is, smiling like a Cheshire cat. How big was his smile? That's a crazy smile.
Oh, man, he looks like he's wearing a mask.
He might be.
Yeah,
There was
he
that
is
one
wearing
fake
that.
Biden. Did you ever see the fake Biden?
Yeah.
The tall guy?
Yeah.
That guy was so much taller. The guy was like 6'4". He was a giant Biden. It made no sense.
They're going to smoke that one by us. Like, it's like, dude, this guy's like, 6'7", could be playing in the NBA. And
He
like,
was
that's Biden.
so much
That's Biden.
taller. They
Yeah.
showed Jill and him together. Jill's like, that. Like, what happened? That's a different human being.
Totally.
It's so nuts, man. It's so nuts. All the different things that happened during this election are wilder than anything you've ever seen in a fucking movie.
It brought so many more people into politics too, and people
yeah.
like, the more people pay attention to what's going on with politicians, with the country, I don't think that's a bad thing, because
Right.
I think bureaucrats and politicians alike, they directly benefit from people not paying attention.
Yes.
And so they only want you to pay attention once a year when they're going to try to get everybody galvanized around a couple little stupid things and then get them out to the voting booth, but not too many. Like, we don't want a lot of complex thought out of the voters. We don't really want them to think about too much.
Right.
Because, we still got a national deficit that we got to increase, and I got to line the pockets of all my buddies.
Yeah.
Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and Lockheed Martin. Like, we don't want them to get in too far.
Yeah.
Like, don't start talking about the reserve, or don't start talking about any of that other stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what it is.
Well, I think that's also why politicians are, some of them at least, are terrified of podcasts.
Yeah.
Because you do have to talk about them. But that's what makes guys like JD and guys like Trump unique, in that they will just sit and talk with anybody. I mean, he sat with Theo Vaughn. Theo talked to him about doing coke.
That's awesome. It was so funny.
Theo's amazing. It was amazing. Theo's an ability to be himself no matter who he's talking to. And him talking to Trump about how he used to love to do coke.
It was like, and Trump just sitting there, which was super funny, by the way.
Like, poor guy. Like, you see Theo falling apart in front of you, like, Jesus Christ, I thought I was running for president here. I think I might have to help this young fella.
who do I need to talk to about this?
But, like, Kamala didn't have the ability to do that. Or if she did, nobody brought it out of her. I was hoping I could. I really was. I was hoping I could have a conversation with her. There's all this talk now that the reason why she didn't do it is because of progressive people in her party, the pushback.
Right.
Which might have some truth to it, but for the record, they offered me 2 very specific days. and in different places in the country to travel and then go do it and do it for an hour. I said I didn't want to do that. And especially after Trump had done it. Here, in 3 hours, I'm like, this is the only way to do it. And Elon said it best. He goes, you can kind of bullshit someone for an hour. But he goes, hour 2 and hour 3. Like, that's when the real you comes out.
Yeah, you're gonna get.
It's the real you.
You're gonna tear the layers off the onion, right? So
100%.
it's like
100%.
it might make you cry,
Yeah.
and the more you peel it, the more you might be like, oh, this person's fucking stupid.
How
as shit.
much are you bullshitting the world, right? And
Yeah,
the quote about Trump, or the narrative about Trump, has always been that he's bullshitting everybody, that he's
Right.
a con man. He's definitely very persuasive. You know, Scott Adams has wrote about this pretty much in depth, about how well Trump practices the art of persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the art of the deal. He's great at making people his friend and making relationships. And if you're his enemy, fuck you, scorched earth. You know, it's like this. And there's fear of that. You don't want to get on his bad side. There's all this, like, there's this art of, like, how he negotiates, and it's
Yeah.
gone through this years and years and years of business. But
Yeah.
but that's him. That's the guy's right there. You could talk to him about everything and anything. He's right there. He's not protecting any of his ideas. He called a girl he allegedly slept with horseface when he was the president on Twitter.
It's so funny.
It's the wildest shit. So you're getting what you get. That's who the guy is, and you love. I like him. I've grown to like him. I had a much more negative opinion of him back in the day because it was. There's only so much you can pay attention to and do deep dives on
Right.
before you lose your fucking mind. And with him, I was always like, oh, that guy, the grab him by the pussy guy, like, it's probably not good for the country. That seems crazy. But as time went on, I was like, oh, you need a guy that is completely crazy to expose how corrupt the whole system is.
Yeah.
And how they all collude together, and how they all say this. There's all these montages of clips of news organizations saying the same narrative outright, over and over, verbatim, word by word. They're getting fed this by someone, some entity, they're somehow or another they're collaborating, and they're all choosing this very specific narrative, and they're running with it, and they're trying to destroy people with it. And I saw them do it with me.
Yeah.
I saw them do it with me during the COVID thing. And it was all motivated by the pharmaceutical drug companies and the profits. And they were terrified that someone's going to come along and somehow or another put a notch in this little thing that they've created, which is a devious little thing that they've done, where they eliminated all sorts of other remedies. They cut out all these generic drugs that possibly could have been used to help people. They denied people the use of monoclonal antibodies. They pushed the fucking shit out of this one thing so they could make money off of it. And they did it in collusion with the media. No one acted like a journalist. No one looked at the excess deaths. No one looked at the instances of myocarditis in young people. No one looked at any of that. There was no journalism. It just showed everyone that the whole system is bought and paid for. It's all corrupt. And the only way you could find out who a person really is to listen to them talk for long periods of time. It's the only thing, it's the only truth serum we have left.
Right.
And even that's not 100% effective, but it's pretty good. It's pretty fun. Your brain knows bullshit. You know, you ever like met some guy and like he's dating this girl that you know, and there's just something about it. It's like, what, he's shaking my hand, he's being nice to me, and I'm like, I don't trust this motherfucker. Like, something's gross about this guy. And then you find out he's a piece of shit. But it's
100%.
always this thing, like you
Yeah.
feel something. If you talk
Yeah.
to someone long enough, there's patterns in the way they talk, the way they think, the way they consider things, whether or not they can admit that they're wrong, or whether or not they can tell you why they changed their mind, how did they form their narratives, like what bad paths were they on, and what personal correction did they make, and how long did it take before you got to a better place. You learn about people when you hear them talk for long periods of time. You can't fake personal growth. You can't fake like stuff you've learned. You can't fake flaws that you're willing to expose to people so that they can perhaps see them in themselves. You can't fake that. And all those people like Mike Pence, he's got zero of that. You can't sit that guy down and have a conversation, a real conversation with him.
He's so afraid. Honestly, I don't think he even knows who he is.
Probably doesn't.
Guys like that don't even know who
Like
they
an
are.
actor.
Yeah, they're like actors. Like my buddy Dave, we were talking yesterday. You met him the other night. Like, I've known him for 20
Great
years.
guy.
Like,
He was a lot of fun.
dude, you know, we met in Kabul back in the day, Dave and I, like, we go way back. And
He's good friends with Bruce and with my friend.
Yeah, crazy. Like, because he was a team guy, right? So he's like former SEAL, CIA guy. And Dave and I were talking about this, and when you can just be authentically engaged with people, where you can just be yourself, and that's part of the issue with, I think, a lot of vets is, and why they connect really well with vets, is because you can just authentically engage with people and say, this person knows I'm a little bit broken. This person knows that I've probably done shit that I'm not super proud of, and they know that I've got a dark sense of humor. But I can, like, just kind of I can open my heart and just have a real conversation with somebody. And that's the shit you chase.
Yeah.
Where you can just be yourself and
Yeah.
you can talk about stuff and
Right.
you can, like, try to evolve the way you're thinking and feeling.
Right.
And these artificial bullshit conversations that we have throughout our day with people we don't give a shit about, or these, like, inauthentic, unreal, veneer people. It's like,
Yeah.
I have no interest in having a conversation with a fake person. They're
is-
stupid.
The best thing that I took out of moving to Texas,
Yeah.
from moving to LA, I have way less of those conversations. I have almost none of them here. All my conversations here are like with normal people.
Right.
They're normal. So many people are infected by the rhythm of Hollywood, which is just about people trying to become successful. And the way you become successful in Hollywood is you get chosen, because you have to go on auditions.
Right.
That's the primary, right? The number one, top of the food chain. Well, I guess rock star and movie star are number one and number two. Maybe interchangeable. Maybe they're the same. Same. If it's a 10, like biggest stars in the world, it's 10. The movie stars and rock stars, and movie stars. Everything you do is about your relationships with people and whether or not people think you align with them politically, and whether or not you support the right causes. You wear the bow tie at the Oscars, you act proper, you do all the things that you're supposed to do. And if you do all the things you're supposed to do, then you get into the club. And if you don't do all the things you're going to do, then they're not going to use you. They're going to use Daniel Craig. They're going to use this guy. They're going to use that guy. They're going to use Dave Bautista. They're going to use The Rock. They're going to use... There's so many guys that want these roles, and there's only so many good roles.
Right.
Especially if you're going to be a male movie star, like, so no one can color outside the lines. And Dennis Quaid is like one of the rare few, like, male movie stars who just fucking completely gave up. He's like, I support Trump. I'm a Christian. I sing gospel music. Like, fuck you. I quit. And he did this Reagan movie. It was a Reagan movie, okay?
Yeah.
It's about a 1980s president. They wouldn't let him advertise on certain social media networks because they said it was during the time of the election and it could affect the election. What was it? Was it Facebook? Like,
That's
what kept him
insane.
from? Was it YouTube or Facebook? One of the social media outlets kept him from advertising this movie, which is a great movie about Reagan, where he plays Reagan. He does a fucking amazing job. It has nothing to do with today. It's about a guy who's dead. He's dead.
He's dead. He's been dead forever, right?
He was dead his last year in office. He was at fucking full-on
Dude.
Alzheimer's.
That's the thing with this whole social media, censorship, demonetization, like the way that they honestly, and I want to say they, like, there's a big group, and you were talking about it the other night, even with your show, with the Trump show, and then it's not trending, you can't even find it. The firearms community on YouTube deals with this all the time.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
The guys that have the huge YouTube channels from a firearms perspective,
Sure.
they're demonetized. They have to upload multiple times. They're in a constant
My good friend
battle.
Collins, Colion Noir,
Yeah.
his fucking show, he can't get it to grow. He
No.
can't get his Instagram to grow. He's like completely stifled.
And they're keeping the lid on this. I
Yes.
mean, like Brandon Herrera.
After he was on the podcast, Facebook acknowledged the mistake and lifted the restriction.
Yeah,
weird.
you acknowledged it. Look at this. He expressed belief that Facebook labeled the content as an attempt to sway an election.
Yeah. Like the entire
Thank you, Facebook.
They said it was
Firearms-
automated in their defense, but that's
It was just a mistake, Jamie. Jamie, it's just a mistake.
yeah. The entire firearms community, and it's weird because when I say we talk about it all the time. Like whether it's the biggest YouTube channels on for the firearm space, they're constantly battling, trying to keep their channels up. This is a constitutionally protected right.
Right.
And because there's a difference in political opinion, they can tip the scale,
Right.
which is completely insane to me. Right? And there's a lot of traffic. I mean, you think about some of these really big channels that are out there. These guys drive millions and millions of views.
Mm-hmm.
People obviously want to watch, and they can't increase their reach, or they get demonetized, and they're constantly screwed with over and over and over again. And that's the way that I think a lot of us have felt. We've been living under the thumb of, our social media oligarchs that are deciding whether or not our information is agreeable to their political opinion.
Did I ever tell you the time that I was having a conversation with a Facebook, YouTube executive, and my wife had to grab my leg under the table and stop me? 'Cause
Seriously?
in Hawaii. Okay, so I'm with a friend, and my friend was an executive at Google. A very nice person, great, no problems with them. We're all having a good time. We're sitting down drinking and talking, and I got a couple in me. And this lady who's a bigwig at YouTube sits down across from me, and we start talking. And I said, when it comes, so we get into this conversation. It's a very friendly conversation. Nothing problematic at all. I don't think she even knows who I am. And this is a long time ago. So this is like 2015, 14. So my podcast is not that big.
Right.
It's not that big at all. I can tell you exactly when it was. When did Sam Harris and Douglas Murray have a conversation? When did The Strange Death of Europe come out? Tell me about that. That's Douglas Murray's amazing book that has been proved now to be absolutely accurate in his assessment of what was going to happen to Europe with Muslim integration. Essentially, the guy nailed it. And him and Sam Harris. Okay, so you have two public intellectuals who are having a conversation about cultures and about what is different about these Islamic cultures and their desire to impose Sharia law, like at least in certain areas. So they're having this conversation. And it gets labeled as it gets flagged off this guy's account. So I find out about this video because this guy has an account, and I don't remember where he posted it, maybe Twitter, but he said, I got flagged on YouTube for having this in my playlist as something that I watch. Like, not even something he hosts on his channel. So I asked the lady, I said, why would someone get flagged for a conversation? She goes, it was hate speech. Just like that. Just like that, it was hate speech. I go, do you remember the conversation? Because I watched the conversation. I don't think it was hate speech at all. It was definitely hate speech. Like, but it's between two public, and then my wife just clamps down on my neck because she sees I'm fucking, I'm rabid. Now, like, it's two public intellectuals having a conversation about a real thing that's happening in the world, and there's no hate speech in that. There's no slurs. There's no degrading of people, in a generalization of people. There's no racism. This is they're talking about real cultural differences and how they're going to affect Europe. And this fucking lady it's hate speech. The arrogance of the way she said it to me. And she was a big executive. And then I was like, oh boy. I was boiling. I was boiling. And thank God my wife grabbed my leg. She fucking she grabbed the shit out of my leg because I was ready to go. Because the lady was going to engage with me. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a podcast. You're fucked. You're fucked. You're fucked. You're just lucky there's no cameras here. What you're saying is absolutely crazy. Like, who are you to make that distinction? And do you have any idea how that affects us culturally? When a person like yourself who lives in this fucking San Francisco, this whole bizarre tech cult bubble. That's what you live in.
Yeah.
And you want to impose this crazy leftist perspective on everyone in the world to the point where you're not even allowing two world-renowned public intellectuals have a public discussion about this in front of an audience.
Dude, I would deal with that all the time where I would talk about the Middle East. I spent most of my adult life in the Middle East. I was in Iraq, I was in Jerusalem, I was all around the Middle East and Africa. And I would just say, I just don't agree with the way that Saudi Arabia runs, right? I don't agree with monarchy. I don't agree with Islamic Sharia law. I don't agree. Oh, you're a fucking racist. And you're like, what? No, man. I just don't think that it's the best way to go about it, right? Like,
There's a bunch of different ways people live.
It's like, no, I'm not a racist. I've lived there. I've
Right.
been there. I've spent a ton of time there. I think this is better. And these are the reasons why. And people didn't even want to have a conversation with, oh, you're racist.
But this is what's crazy. You have to be able to have those conversations even if that person's wrong. Like if someone wants to get on YouTube and tell the world why Sharia law is better, I think they should be able to do that. I let them do it and let someone counter it and let them have debates. And Sam Harris has had a bunch of debates like that. You can watch them online. They're amazing. Let people figure out who they agree with. And if you just shut down discourse and say that it's hate speech, and you're defining hate speech as no slurs, there's no like, we got to kill all these people. There's none of that. There's no hate in this conversation. You're saying hate speech is disagreeing with a narrative that all leftists must ascribe to, regardless of any objective assessment of the facts. And you're just sitting down and looking at it and go, you know, I don't think I agree with this aspect of it. Like, I think that, like, telling women that they have to wear hijab everywhere, that's you're not giving them the choice. You're not giving someone choice is just fundamentally bad for the race. For humans, it's oppression.
Anything outside of a meritocracy in the context of being able to evolve a conversation based on the best idea wins. And when you're chopping out 50% of your population and saying their beasts of burden and where they belong is just essentially
Basket of deplorables.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, this is the problem that I have with this.
Yeah.
And anytime that I've had this conversation around the Middle East, where, like, these are the things I don't like about it. Right? I mean, there's lots of different things. It could be that, you know, the Arab men will typically wear this very long, open bottom garb, right? It's typically referred to as a man dress. I'm like, God, I hate that thing. This thing's stupid. Like, I've had to wear it, you know, and I
Did you
fucking
wear
hate
underwear?
it.
Did you wear underwear in it?
Yeah, sometimes,
Did
you
you
know.
shit your pants?
I've worn a hijab. Like, we were talking
Did
about
you
it.
really?
Yeah, like, I had like a tiny little like belt-fed machine gun that I'd have to wear because I'm a small guy, right? I'm 160 pounds, and so I would often be the woman because I could be this fucking. I got a feminine frame, man. Yeah, I've got, you know, birthing hips, of course, but you know, I could get a little saw with, which is a squad automatic weapon, a little belt-fed machine gun, a couple frags underneath a hijab, and I could sit in the back seat.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, surprise, bitch, I'm not a woman.
Picturing you with a hijab and a belt-fed machine gun under your dress is fucking hilarious.
It's so,
Oh my
it's so
God.
much fun, man. Like,
Did you have like a thing where you could pop it up, like a Loki jacket?
Yeah. So you'd Velcro. So we had a whole department in the agency where they would like design costumes and shit for you. So I had this fake mustache. I got a picture of it. I'll fucking send it to you. But I had this fake mustache, and like they would put tanner and fake mustache and like sunglasses. So I'd like drive around looking like Saddam half the time. I'm
Like that fucking American World Police movie?
oh yeah. Full on. And it's so funny because like you'd have like no shit a person putting makeup on you before you like go out to do something. You know, got a fake mustache and, you know, or for me, I'm like, just give me the job. I already know what I'm doing. Just give me the fucking, put me in the lady
I want
thing.
to be the fat girl.
Put
Did they
me in the
make
lady
you-
thing.
Are we allowed to wear makeup at all? Are the Islamic women allowed to wear makeup under their hijab or no?
Yeah, they can depending on where they are.
Some parts they don't let them do it.
Some parts, yeah, depending on how extreme they are. But if you went to like, Kuwait or something like that, they would flash it. You know,
How
it's like a
wild is it?
signify that they're like racy. You know,
Ooh, sassy.
Yeah, little hussy.
Look at these eyelashes.
Yeah,
Oh my God! I saw her nostrils.
sorry, ankles.
This bitch is wild.
Hot.
Isn't it wild though that religion, the absolute most suppressive religion when it comes to women and gays, are the ones that the progressives are so vehemently defending? Like that's the one they defend over all religions. You can be like a leftist will accuse you readily and quickly of being Islamophobic. It's a great thing. It can shut you down. It's a great pejorative. But no one ever accuses you of being an anti-Christian. No one. It never comes up. No one, there's not even a word, right? You can have Islamophobic. Is there a Christianophobic? I've never heard it. What is a word, like a disparaging word for someone who is prejudiced against Christians? Does it exist?
I don't know. I mean,
it probably doesn't even. It's like honky.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a racist term for white people. Like cracker doesn't
like
work.
A Caucasian cis male. I don't even know what that means.
It says
but
Christianophobia or whatever.
Christianophobia. See, that's
I've never heard anyone utter that.
That's too much garblegook. You can't say it fast.
No.
Islamophobia is kind of fun.
Yeah, Islamophobia flows. It sounds like you're intellectual. Mm-hmm. Well, this podcast is filled with Islamophobia. First of all, let's just discuss this. This is really important. We need to direct them to feminism.
But I think that's so funny because when I listen to academics, you know, I'll pull up a YouTube and I'll go down a rabbit hole on a certain thing and I'll listen to an academic, and then half of them, I shouldn't say half of them, like a good portion of them, they're talking about things they've never actually experienced.
Right.
So for me, I've lived in the Middle East. Like I've lived in Jerusalem. Like I've lived and interacted and been in these cultures and seen them in a very vivid way. And when I say this, like tactical and combat experience, specifically in these countries, it's very vivid. And part of the problem with this differentiation, let's go back to it, but this differentiation between the decision makers and the people actually implementing the tactical execution on the ground is that there's a huge disconnect from the reality. They don't have the wisdom to understand what it is. And what I used to tell people is like I was almost like a zookeeper, where I would usher, depending on the person, I would usher them through the fucking zoo so they could see what's going on, but they would see it from afar. And I kept the lions from eating them.
Right.
And there's this very clear differentiation between the people in charge, and most of them shouldn't have been in a combat zone, specifically in the agency. They should have not have been in a combat zone. And when you unpack the agency and you look at, you have paramilitary guys, and they're more than qualified to be there, and then you have like the cocktail circuit guys, and they're just trying to get their combat tour so they can get promoted to another fucking spot, but they actually have no business being there. Meaning, they need guys like me to keep them alive. Like
so they're just like getting in days for
that's all they're doing.
The ledger.
There's a very famous, infamous case officer from Coast back in the day, and I was on the ground there. No, not in Coast, in Kabul at the time. And she was being groomed to be the assistant director. There's a great book on it called Double Agent, but I was on the ground when it happened. And she had this asset that she was trying to get in, which is an agency asset that she was trying to get into a base in Coast. Once again, this person has no... They should not be here. They should be in Germany going to a cocktail party, like pretending like they're really cool because they have high intellect. They have no context to going down to the basis of reality, and these are like rules of the jungle. Like this power is the only language they speak. You can't intellect your way out of this thing. Like, 'cause a fucking bullet is a bullet. A bat is a bat. Like, it will win over your articulation every time. If you want to win a debate and you just put an axe handle through somebody's fucking head, that's how you win, right? That's like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. So, like, they bring in this asset, and she's like, oh, you know, this asset is the guy. He's going to give us the coordinates to bin Laden. We've been working with him for a long time. He's an amazing guy. It's his birthday. He wants us to bring him a cake. So she bypasses all the security systems, bringing in a guy from Pakistan. So she gets him, because he's like, I don't want to go through any security. I'm your trusted guy. I don't want to go through I don't want to go through any security. So she tells security, stand down. She doesn't tell anybody about it. She brings this guy in through the gate, like blows him through. Now the security guys, mind you, are like, what the fuck did you just do? They're running down to the situation to try to get ahead of it. He steps out and he looks like the Michelin tire man and fucking clacks off.
Oh, God.
And 3 of my friends were killed in that suicide bomb. She was killed ultimately. But that's a perfect example, and I mean, there's like multiple different examples of there's a different cadence mindset and capability associated with what I would say is the paramilitary guys versus the case officers, the spies. They're just totally different guys.
Right.
And they tried to intermingle because of capabilities and, more importantly, promotions to try to get people like promoted, which is another reason why significant things have to change over there. And they
So
got
they would
guys
just
hurt.
send people to you just to, you were supposed to protect these people.
Yeah. So they could be collection officers on the ground. I mean, like time after time, example after example. I had this guy in this town called Lashkagar, out in the middle of fucking nowhere. And before we go there, so let's rewind to Iraq. I had a spy that we were working with, and they're called case officers in the agency. And we go out to pick her up from the airfield, and we're like bringing her to where she needs to go. And we pick her up, and she gets in the car behind. She gets in the car behind me, and she takes out her pistol. She points it, and I'm in the passenger seat. She's right behind me. She takes out her Glock. She puts a magazine in it, racks the slide right behind my head, like directly into the back of my head.
Oh, my God.
And I turn around, I'm like, and I'll tell you exactly what I said. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? As I turn around, I'm like, give me that thing. I'm like, and I called her some like very rude things, right? So I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Don't take your pistol out. I go, if both of us are dead, then think about it. But I'm going to keep this. You just don't have it anymore. So I actually gave her back the empty pistol. I was like, listen, if both of us are dead, feel free. Take one of our guns, take both of our guns. I don't give a shit because I'm dead. But I get back in, and the chief of base at the time pulls me in. He's a fucking super good dude. And he's like, calls me, he's like, hey man, heard you had quite an exchange with somebody, and you know, we don't really appreciate, you know, this, and you know, I might have to send you home. And I was like, did she tell you what she did? He was like, no, I just thought she got in the car and you told her, like, you know, you fucking dumb whatever, and give me your gun. I was like, no, she racked her slide into the back of my head. And he's like, oh God, get out of here, I'll talk to her. It's like, oh God, get out of here, I'll talk to her. Like, just forgets. But it's like,
do they even have to show competency in weapons use?
yeah, but it's
Do they go through the same sort of program?
everybody thinks there's like this Jason Bourne type person, you know, like spies are Jason Bourne or something like that. It's like, it's just not fundamentally correct. Like any soft guy is much more proficient in firearms. I taught a selection and vetting course for former soft guys that wanted to come into the agency, and I taught it for a couple years. I was one of the main architects behind the selection criteria, and we would have to go out and train spies, and I would shoot their qualification course with my left hand, like on 2 hours of sleep, still half in the fucking back. Like, it's just so like ridiculously
Ingrained.
yeah, and more importantly, that's not their job, right? They're
Right.
collection people, and I'm defending them to a certain degree because they're very high IQ. Their selection criteria in their course is
They're
very
just not
difficult.
prepared for that.
No, they don't belong in those places. Like, when you go into when you go into a combat zone, and when it's a very complex, because there's different areas in combat zones, and some of them are more dangerous than others. you can't have some of those people there. It's too dangerous, man. You got to have collection people that are on the military side that can handle themselves unilaterally, and you can't have like your regular humdrum spy. This isn't Jason Bourne. They're not competent. And more importantly, that's not their thing. It's the thing of proficient artisans in combat collection and the art of war, and that is a very subset niche profession of guys that are extremely competent and very dangerous.
Why do we want to believe in a Jason Bourne?
I think
People love that.
They
narrative.
love it.
They love that
Yeah.
narrative. Some super spy, 007 dude that can fuck everybody up.
It's fun, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we noticed you're a really good boxer in your local gym, and you went to Yale. We're gonna recruit you. Like, get the fuck out of here. That's so stupid.
He's a
What?
judo champion.
Yeah, he's a judo champion. You know, it always starts the
Recruited him into the
same way.
CIA.
Like,
Yeah.
oh man, we noticed you're hitting the bags, and you're a,
Yeah,
you're
right.
a political
It's like-
science major in Yale. Like,
There's a guy
get
with
outta here.
glasses and a hat on watching you run around the track. I think we found our man.
If they only knew the bureaucratic steps that it took to like get into it, where it's just like so much paperwork and interviews, and it's like, who is this guy? What has he done? And
Well, what's wild to me is the spies that infiltrate terrorist organizations. Like, there's people that are in the IDF that have infiltrated
Yeah.
Hamas.
Yeah.
They live with them. They're
Lots.
in there.
lots.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
You imagine
so respectful.
that life?
Wow.
That life is nuts, man. Worried you're going to be found out, and these guys knowing, Hamas knowing that a certain percentage of these people have to be Israelis?
Well,
That is so crazy that they do that.
when you have those guys, and we need those guys. Like, I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we need those guys.
Must be so exciting.
The non-official cover, the Knox. Yeah. That's that. I mean, that there's so much respect.
Well, you were explaining that one guy that's a professor.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, out of all the guys, like, I had such a unique ride in history in times, right, where, you know, looking out the window, kind of just being a passenger in history, and then being able to talk to some of these guys. And I would sit down, and I would always find like the older guy that's in the, you know, we have like dining halls, or the agency has their own separate dining halls and
Right.
bars and shit like that. And I sat down with a guy one day, and it was just like, hey man, what's your story, you know? And he was telling me he was an anthropology professor at the University of Washington, and he was finishing his PhD, and he was crossing the Mackenzie Traverse in Canada, and he did it in era-appropriate clothing in a canoe and the whole fucking thing, right? It's just completely insane.
Oh, my God.
It's like so insane. And I was like, oh, how'd you get in, you know? And so he's making his way across. He gets to a cabin. He's starving. He's going to die. He's explaining this to me. He's like, I'm going to die. I break into this trapper cabin. I find a bunch of old canned food. I just like engorge myself. And now I have the screaming shits. And I'm like wiping my ass with this National Geographic, and I pull out this ad, and the agency used to have ads in National Geographic. And he thought to himself, wow, that's really interesting. I should apply. So he applied. When he got back,
Imagine the scenario. You're
Yeah.
fucking starving, then you're eating botulism-filled cans of beans with pork and shit, wiping your ass with a National Geographic. You see an ad. I mean, it's a fucking scene in a movie.
it's insane.
That's a scene in a movie.
So
right?
he goes back to University of Washington, becomes a professor. The agency, he goes through the entire process. The agency recruits him. He goes through training, but still he has to keep his double life going. And
So he starts a life as a double life, in fact. Mm-hmm. Becomes a professor while he's in the agency.
correct.
Wow. So from the jump, he's got a double life. It's not like he gets recruited, he's some Nobel Prize winner, and they say, we need you to be for America.
Yeah.
Wow.
In his first job, I'll never forget him describing this to me, because I didn't know any of this. So it's part history, part just agency history. And he goes, my first job was I flew to Angola. And I just had a suitcase full of money. And they dropped me off in the middle of nowhere, and they're like, go kill Cubans. That was his job.
Jesus Christ. Just a bag of money.
That was
and
it.
One straight directive.
Okay, and so in defense here, that's cool as shit. Like,
pretty wild.
Yeah, it's wild.
They trust that
Like,
guy.
Hey, here's a bag of money.
Yeah.
Go kill some Cubans, because you had, it's a proxy war, right, between South Africa and it was the Soviets and the Cuban by proxy. They were both supporting each other. They were both supporting the communist revolution in Angola. So we were pushing back, from the state's perspective, we were pushing back against the Soviet intervention, which was driven from the Cubans. So you had a huge Cuban intervention, which is something most people don't realize. And I just thought it was fascinating because it was the first time I'd heard about it. And here's this guy that his job was, here's a bag of money, go kill Cubans. That's your job.
While he's a professor.
Pretty cool. While he's a professor. So he'd be like so he would go back to, whatever university and go, okay, kids, I know I've been out on a dig, and I've been building, atlatls in Australia trying to do this, but really we was in Angola hunting Cubans.
Holy shit.
That's pretty badass. That's way better than Indiana Jones as far as I'm concerned.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
pretty cool.
Writing on the chalkboard and shit. Thinking about gunning dudes down. Okay. And then plus the 5.
Yeah.
Who here can answer this?
Nobody,
Oh my
nobody can know.
That's so
He
cool.
never tells anybody.
Anybody.
No, and he's still. I mean,
So I guess with a guy like that, if you can find a guy who's willing to wear era equivalent clothing, would you say an era correct
yeah.
clothing,
Era.
and make his way through a trek that was most likely going to kill people in the 1800s?
Bro.
You know who did something like that? He didn't do the whole thing, but Ranella, the way I met him was he had a show before Meat Eater. It was called The Wild Within, and I got really addicted to it.
Seriously?
Yeah. I used to love, but way before I ever went hunting, I used to love watching hunting shows.
Yeah.
I used to watch like Ted Nugent's Spirit of the Wild. My wife was always like,
Yeah.
what the fuck are you watching? But I was always obsessed with hunting shows and wilderness shows, people in the wilderness. Because every time I'm in the woods, I feel like it's a vitamin. I'm like, oh, I'm getting this vitamin.
Yeah.
So I was like, I wanted to like experience more of that in my life, so I was watching on TV. So there was a show called The Wild Within. And what Ranella did was, I think he used like era-correct weapons too. I think he used like a musket, and he shot a bison, and he turned the bison into like, I think it was a bison. Whatever the animal was, he turned it into a boat. He made a boat out of it and drifted down this river. He did like all these things that these pioneers did back in the day when they were making their way across the country.
That sounds awesome.
It was pretty dope. That's how I got to meet him. That's how I got him on my podcast. Before Meat Eater was ever a show.
Okay.
Yeah. He was super dismissive of podcasts. Now he's got one.
I feel like there's a lot
what
of-
am I doing here? I'm in this comedy club with this fucking dude who's smoking weed. Like, this is ridiculous.
I feel like there's a lot of people that probably dismissed it. They're like,
yeah.
oh, what the fuck is Joe doing?
But now he's got a great podcast of his own. I love that
Yeah.
guy to death.
No, he's awesome.
He's such a smart dude, too. He knows so many things. He's a fascinating guy to talk to because he's super well-read. And he can talk to you about all kinds of shit that you would not expect from a guy who's a professional hunter.
No.
You know, he talks like a PhD. It's very, but also like a hunter. Very unusual dude. And like one of the very best guys to explain hunting. Like I saw a debate that he had. It was like I think it was a book that he had released. And he was doing one of those talks they do at bookstores. And this guy was a vegan. And the guy in the audience was a vegan. The guy got upset with him. And the Ranella handled it so perfectly. Just the way he communicated with the guy and explaining his perspective, and you have a different perspective, and I'd love to have a conversation with you. Didn't do it with any like bullshit. I mean, Ted Nugent's like, you pussy, grow another vagina. but Ranella's like the perfect answer to people that objectively they look at it and go, wait a minute, I do eat meat. Like, I am a hypocrite. I am hiring a supermarket hitman. Like, why am I upset at this man who not only hunts his meat but cooks it and writes cookbooks
Right.
and cooks it on television?
Yeah.
And like, this is the same thing. Like, what are we doing here? This is so stupid. You know, and then you've got the people that really believe that you shouldn't eat anything but plants. And my problem with that is I think plants are smart. I think they just move real slow, and I think they have a
Right.
way of interacting that is noticeable and measurable. I think there's probably a consciousness to plants. I think life eats life, and I think that's the only way it survives, and I think that's just the way it goes. That is just the way it goes. And you can choose to just eat plants, but I don't think you're going to be as healthy. I think it's too hard. I think people can kind of survive on vegan diets and do well on vegan diets. There's athletes that are on vegan diets. I don't think they hit peak performance and thrive. I think that's all people who are consuming nutrient-dense meats and fish and eggs. Those are the people that, when you look at athletes, the best athletes in every sport are all consuming protein. They're all consuming animal protein. There's so few that are vegans that hit elite status and maintain. A lot of them get injured when they switch to vegan too. There's just so much in there. There's collagen and B12 and there's so many different aspects, the different amino acids. You can have this ethical thing in your head, and I get that ethical thing. Like, I don't want to see a thing suffer. I think plants suffer, you just don't feel it.
Right.
I really do. I think there's a communication with them that's probably similar but different to the way we feel about animals getting killed by other animals. I think it's just a part of this whole process. I mean, they've shown that you can take the recordings of beetles eating leaves and play recordings of beetles eating leaves near a tree, and the tree will experience distress to the point where it changes the profile, the flavor profile of the leaves. It releases chemicals, these phytochemicals into the leaves that makes it disgusting for the bugs. And they do it with giraffes. Like, when giraffes eat, I think it's acacia trees. When giraffes eat acacia trees,
Right.
the trees downwind all become disgusting to the point where the giraffes will starve because they won't eat it. They change their flavor profile to protect themselves. They release some sort of chemical. It makes them inedible.
Well, I think that's so interesting. Because you can see it with who's it? Paul Stamets has.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when the fungi
Mycelium,
is
yeah.
like talking and communicating, and the health benefits to like fungi and different plants. Like, I think anytime you have this edict where no meat, no plants, no. I think that's just another version of religious extremism. Where
Yeah.
if you were just to say, what makes sense? And what's it, morally? What am I going to have to coalesce in? From me, I don't want to be a hypocrite, so I hunt. Like, that's the way it is. And we eat a ton of wild meat. I'm not a hypocrite. We eat meat. I love fish. I love fruits and vegetables. But I think if you're making this determination where there's no meat, this is the only thing I'm going to eat. Well, one, that's a lot of time, effort, and energy that you're spending specifically on your diet constraints that could be allocated to being a better dad. Or
Well, maybe
like,
they could do all those things too. So
maybe, I don't know.
I think their philosophical point is a good one. I think their ethics, the morals, their perspective is that I want to live a life with the least suffering possible. I think that's noble. I really do. I think the problem is life eats life. And I think that's the real problem. And I think the problem is if you're buying just vegetables in the store, boy, you need to take a good look at monocrop agriculture because it's
Right.
fucking bananas.
Yeah.
You know, there was Taylor Sheridan in Yellowstone. There was a scene where Kevin Costner was talking to the hippie lady who's trying to like shut down ranches and shit. I forget what her thing was. But he was explaining how if you're on a vegan diet, you want to kill the most things, become a vegan. Because you don't understand, like, if one life is one life, okay? If the life of a gopher and the life of an elk are the same thing, and why wouldn't they be, right? You have no idea how many things have to fucking die to make monocrop agriculture. It's a bloodbath. They kill everything. They kill groundhogs, ground squirrels, you fucking name it. Ground nesting birds, fawns, everything gets gobbled up by combines. It's an enormous industrial operation. It's not natural. So now you're limited to organic plants, okay? So if you're growing all of your own food and, you're growing a lot of soybeans, a lot of different things, like if you grow hemp, if you're in a place where you can grow it legally, hemp is actually a really good source of protein.
Right.
It's actually got a really complete amino acid profile. You can, you can survive. You can do it that way. But if you're a regular vegan, if you're just a person who, I get vegan pizza at the supermarket, shut the fuck up. You're contributing to this mass slaughter of small animals. You're just not aware of it.
Have you watched that Netflix docu-series on? It's basically vegan propaganda. I forget what its name
Is it The Game Changers? That's
Probably.
the one?
Yeah,
movie?
yeah,
It's a
yeah. Did you watch that?
Yeah, I know that
Yeah,
they
yeah.
did it. I had them on it.
Well, I thought it was fascinating, like from a wide variety of reasons, but more importantly, so I went and got some vegan cheese. And it was
Yeah.
like, tried it. I was like, okay, it's not bad, but I mean, dude, it's a laundry list of ingredients associated with making this, which seems pretty insane to me versus what's the ingredient on a good cheese?
Milk.
Right.
It's so dumb.
This thing's like a dissertation of ingredients.
And it's so processed.
Yeah.
That is literally what it is. If you want to be, I said that a million times, you want to be a vegetarian, eat Indian food. They make delicious vegetarian food.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't have to eat fucking vegan cheese. Stop
gross.
pretending. Stop lying. Stop eating tofuti or whatever the fuck that shit is. Get out of here.
Get out of it.
Get the fuck out of here. That's nonsense. What are you eating? And also eat mollusks. People should look into that. Those things are so primitive. They're way more primitive than plants. We just have a problem with them moving. That's all it is. If people, they don't even have nerves. They don't feel pain.
Right.
They're fucking the simplest of organisms. Yet their protein is like animal protein. It's really good for you.
Do you eat oysters?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Eat the fuck out of oysters. And every now and then I hear about some
Snails?
dude dying. Yeah, I eat escargot. I eat
yeah.
that. But every now and then I hear about a dude dying from oysters.
So we were in Normandy. This is super funny story. So I went out to the 80th anniversary for the Normandy invasion, took a bunch of dudes out there. And my kids and I are out on this beach. And I'm taking my pocket knife out and I'm just chopping the oysters off the rocks and eating oysters straight out of the ocean.
Oh, wow.
And my girls are running away from me. They're like, this is the grossest shit I've ever seen. And then pretty soon they got into it. So then they're trying to find me the oysters to bring them back and show me where they are. My wife was like, you're going to fucking die. Like you're going to poison yourself. You're eating these right out of Normandy. Like it's one of the beaches out there.
So all
And
the
I was like, I don't give a
munitions
shit.
are in the water.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't give a shit. And then I had to, I'm eating them, and then I quickly searched, hey, are there any toxins? After I've eaten 3, are there any toxins in the oysters in Normandy? And thank God it was 99.9%. I'll live on the edge here.
Yeah, when I lived in San Francisco, you could collect mussels. There was mussels that were on the rocks. But then I think I brought them home once. But then I found out that there's a couple months out of the year that they're poison. You get red tide, right?
Yeah.
So I was like I dodged the bullet, but I was like, what's that bullet? Because you could just go find mussels and pluck them off of things.
Let me ask you this. So if you were to move back to California, okay, but to take Texas politics with you.
That's not really possible.
But if it were, I'm taking you on an imaginary
would
journey.
I move?
Yeah.
No. I like it here.
You like the weather?
I like everything. I like the size of it. I like the way people behave. People are super friendly. I like the scene here. The restaurant scene's amazing. The comedy scene's amazing. Live music. Bunch of cool people now. So many of my friends moved here.
Yeah.
I love it here.
Yeah.
I just love the vibe. I love that it's, I love that we're not connected to the Hollywood machine. There's a pull of deals and shows and things that you get roped into doing because you think about the money they'll pay you.
Right.
And then you wind up becoming one of those people. Like, you have to say what they say. You have to be, if you're not politically aligned with them, you're going to lose gigs. You change your behavior. I see it with so many comics. They're really good comics coming up. They're like, wow, this guy's going to be good. He's really good. He's getting better all the time. And then they get a fucking show. They get a show, and then they tone everything down, and everything gets softer, and everything, you know, you start seeing some, like, bullshit jokes in there. Like, oh, you decided to cover this joke, cover this subject just for street cred, progressive street cred. And, like, you see it happen. You're like, you got called into the rocks. The sirens, they call you into the rocks. That's what it is, man. They call you into the rocks. You stop being you. You stop being you because they dangle that carrot in front of your face. And there's no carrot out here. The carrot is just podcasts and other comics.
Right.
So that's way better. There's no control. There's no manipulation. There's no someone's dangling this over you. You have to agree with what I agree with. Like, no one cares at all about any of that stuff here.
Like, it's freedom. And we were talking about it the other, I think it was today, right? Where it's like, you know, another comic was like, "Oh, can you believe they're a Democrat?" No, it's weird, like, or whatever, right? You know, and but it's fine in the context of, I think, being a conservative, because I don't necessarily say, like, oh, I'm a Republican. I'm like, I just believe in less government. Like, I don't like bureaucrats at all. I have a high degree of skepticism of anything that they say, and I typically will question anything an elected official will say. So, but for me, I'm like, I don't care if the guy next to me is going to vote for, you know, whatever alternate politician. I care about, like, what are their ideas? Why do they think a certain way? What are they doing? Like, what kind of a human are they? And what is the character of the individual? But am I going to disagree with them? Yeah, but who the fuck cares? Like, it's kind of fun. Like, it's kind of fun to disagree with people and debate them and have a different opinion versus being in an echo chamber where people all agree and they're all kind of lockstep in their belief system. It's kind of fun to have some wingnut talking about socialism half the time. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about? You believe in that? It's like some Orwellian nightmare, man.
And if you could have a conversation with someone where you're friendly with each other and completely disagree, it's a beautiful dance. It's a fun dance to talk to people that have just completely different perspectives. But you're not rude to them.
No.
You just ask them, well, why do you think that? Well, did you ever consider this? And you have conversations like two normal people just having a conversation. Okay, all right, so that's what you think. Huh. What was your childhood like? like, just get into shit. Like, what are we dealing with here? Like, why do you have this perspective? You know, and you have to be able to talk to each other. And there's a bunch of people that we hang out with that have totally different opinions on all kinds of things. Like my friend Josh, who was here the other day, love him to death. He told me he voted for Jill Stein. Said he voted for Jill Stein just like a protest vote.
Wow.
I think the two-party system's stupid. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah. Right. Yeah, I get it. Look, I voted for two libertarian candidates in a row. So I voted for Gary Johnson, and then I voted for Joe Jorgensen. Why? Because I was like, this whole thing's gross. But that's like California. I knew it was going to be blue anyway. California's always blue. It was like a legitimate protest vote. And I guess he was in Florida, so that's a legitimate protest vote if you want to vote to me. It's going to go red anyway, whether you like it or not.
It's going to go red.
Yeah, Florida goes red hard. When they saw Miami go red, they were like, oh, boy.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. And one of the things that they were saying, like the whole, like what goes red and what goes... Like, if you look at the country, like, California is way more red now than it's ever been in the last 4 years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a big difference. If you look at, there's a map of California, how it voted from 2020 to 2024, it's a giant swing. It's like, the red's going like this. See if you can find it, Jamie. It's very interesting. And that's not because people have been radicalized. No. That's because the left has gone fucking cuckoo. You guys have gone crazy, and you're authoritarians. You want everybody to behave and believe and think and talk the way you do, or else.
I've always...
Look at that. Look at the difference.
Holy shit.
Holy shit, dude.
That is wild.
Yeah, it's most of California by landmass. by far.
Yeah.
It's probably 70% by landmass or 60%.
What is that blue up there on the east side? Like, what is that close to? Is that like
What is-
Tahoe?
That's probably where they grow the weed, son.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Right.
What is that?
What is that? Where are you guys
What
at? You
is-
guys got to be like Tahoe.
What is
or-
that one?
Like, that's got to be like Truckee or something.
You got to shut off ad
Yeah.
blocker. These fuckers. There it goes. Oh, these fuckers. Oh, you have to get a sig.
Yeah.
Go to the other, just the image real quick.
See, I've thought about this because I always tell people California is my favorite climate
Yeah.
in the nation.
It's
period.
the best. Yeah, that's it. So, what's the one in the upper? Well, it's not the one that's blue.
Oh, yeah.
It's county.
Yeah, I guarantee you that's where they grow the weed.
Yeah.
They
gotta be
want to
like-
keep everything nice and
Yeah.
quiet up there. Shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck
Everybody,
up.
shut the fuck up.
Hey, man, we don't want these guys to like criminalize weed again. That's what they're fucking
Where's
talking
Humboldt, Jamie? Where's
about. It's up
Humboldt?
north.
It's up here somewhere.
Up
Yeah.
there. That's where they grow all the best weed. That's where they have problems with the cartel too. Cartel grows weed up there too.
The cartel grows weed in California.
Oh yeah.
That's what I was gonna. That's what
you
I
ever-
wanted to ask you was
Yeah.
about the cartel. Do you think that they're really gonna?
That one was Humboldt, the one you guys were asking.
There was Humboldt.
Oh shit! Okay, there we go. You're right.
Yeah, they grow all the weed, son.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, there's a dude named John Norris who's been on the podcast. He wrote a book called Hidden Wars, and he was a game warden. So he's just thinking he's going to go around checking fishing licenses and shit like that. And then one day they find a creek that's been diverted, so they have to follow the creek. They thought maybe a farmer had dammed the creek somewhere and done something to get water illegally. He goes up there and he finds these PVC pipes and it reads this giant grow op, and it's all cartel guys. And so this guy's job changes from being a game warden, let me check your fishing
Right,
line, to
right.
running a fucking tactical unit. They had attack dogs. They had fucking shootouts with the cartel in the woods over weed. Because here's what happened. California made weed legal in the state, but made growing it a misdemeanor if you grow it illegally.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah.
if you are a person who's doing it legally, you can grow it and you can sell it if you have a license. You can open
Right.
up a shop and you can sell it. They tax the shit out of it. It's great for everybody. But the problem is you made growing it illegally a misdemeanor. So then the cartel just starts growing it everywhere in the national forests because even if the guys get arrested, nothing happens. It's a
Right.
misdemeanor. So it's
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
So they're using these crazy toxic poison pesticides, all this shit that's totally illegal to use on regular crops in America. And 90% of the illegal weed that's being bought around the country is coming from them.
Holy shit! I didn't know that.
And they're doing it all in national forests, and they're doing most of it in California. Dude, they find these girls. My friend found one. You know him, Cody.
Oh yeah.
He found a fucking grow out
Holy
on
shit.
Tejon Ranch.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
he found a cartel grow up
What the
on Tejon Ranch, where they had this guy carried in pipes on his shoulder
And diverted
deep
a
into the woods,
stream.
diverted a stream,
Dude.
and then there was this whole field of weed that these guys had planted out there. They were camping out there. They had little religious symbols and shit
like
they kept by their bed to protect them, like the Virgin Mary and shit.
What do you think? I've heard this. This is what I want to talk to you about because it pertains to the cartel. It's like, what do you think about releasing SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force on the cartels? What do you think that looks like?
Well, I think you've solved one problem.
Okay. What's the problem?
You no longer have distribution, but you still have a demand.
You still have a demand.
Yeah. The real problem is there's always going to be a demand. The real problem, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that idea, by the way.
Okay.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
But the